Okay, everybody, welcome. Sorry that I couldn't be with you live last week. I was traveling, and the Burbank airport does not have really great Wi-Fi. But this is me. I'm alive. How are you? All right. I'm not going to bury the lead here. It turns out that your clients are working against you, or more specifically, I should say, their brain is working against you. It turns out that innovation is actually really hard, and your clients' brains will put up resistance to the idea. I don't know about you, but when I walk into a room, I'm usually introduced, hey, this is Eric, he's our director of sustainability, and what clients say to me is, just so you know, I hate sustainability. That's what I hear. That's how people say hi to me when I walk in a room. Just that's what I'm dealing with, right? And I imagine you're getting some of the same. Well, why do they do this? Well, it turns out that we are not actually wired to innovate. Our brains are wired to protect us, and it sees innovation, therefore, as a threat. And this is unfortunate because virtually every single executive sees innovation as a key strategic priority. So how do we innovate when our brains are literally working against us? And the thing doing it is this little thing back here called the amygdala, and it's part of the limbic system of the brain. It's how we respond and assess threats. And both on the psychological and the neuroscientific side, brains are actively working against innovation. So if your brain is fighting innovation, how do you innovate? It's probably what you're thinking. And so I've trained my team and I to listen for what I call these shutdown phrases. See if any of these are familiar. Well, our policy is that we've never done this before, and we tried that back in 2004, and it didn't really work, and the legal team probably won't let us do it anyway, and can you spend 6 months calculating the ROI and payback so we can ignore that, and then let's form a committee so we can kick the can down the road for a while. Sound familiar? Well, those are what I call frictions, and it only takes 1 or 2 frictions before you just do not do, well, anything, really, and they work both on the psychological and the neuroscientific side. On the psychological side, they really are trying to move people outside of their comfort zone. And on the neuroscientific side, people will concoct whole stories of why they can't do sustainability, why they can't innovate. I'll prove it to you. I don't know if you remember when electric cars first came out, we were told that we can't have them because they were, quote, too quiet. Yeah, they're too quiet, and people are going to get run over, so we can't do them, I guess. So how do we innovate when we need innovation now more than ever? How do we achieve this remarkable and regenerative future that we're all talking about? Really, because I see us in the sustainability world as you and I are innovators, right? We are in the innovation business. So how do we innovate when clients are literally afraid of change? And like I said, it only takes 1 or 2 frictions just to stop them in their tracks. So a few years ago, I started this idea that when I would say to a client, hey, do you want a green roof? And they go, no. I said, okay, well, what if I didn't just stop at their first no? What if I just said, well, you really need it? And you might be wondering, why am I being so aggressive with my clients? Well, it's because we have failed. I don't have any other word for it. I've been in practice for 35 years. I've been a sustainability person my entire life. And we failed. We ended up in the exact spot we did not want to be. That is a failure across the board, an unmitigated failure. And I'm not just talking about whatever the hell this is. I mean, we failed on a global level here. Jim Lovelock, who is the founder of Gaia Theory and a lovely human being, by the way, back in 2008, he said, enjoy life while you can. In 20 years, global warming is going to hit the fan. And that was 18 years ago. So it turns out he was right. We failed. There was a line that we were told for decades that we cannot cross, and 2 years ago we crossed it. We failed because our goal was to get 100% of buildings to be net zero, and now it's less than 1%. So that is not a success by any means, is it? So really it gave me pause to step back and think, what can we do differently? What can we do better? Really, with all humility, reassess what we're doing. And the urgency is only increasing because we used to measure billion-dollar disasters. We used to see, 20 in a decade? And now we see that many in a year. This has become our new normal, unfortunately. And all of you have experienced this. All of you have lived through this, right? You just lived through the 12 hottest months on record, and that's just something that's going to be true from now on. The last 10 years were the 10 hottest years on record. The last 3 years were the 3 hottest years on record. And these extreme weather impacts keep increasing. And nowhere is really safe, which is why I live here in Portland. Evidence of this is all the new weather that we've had to invent, right? New words, right? In the Pacific Northwest, we have this thing called the atmospheric rivers. It's like a fire hose that blows up your nose. It's sideways rain. It's crazy. But this is happening all over the country. I was in Phoenix the day after they had received a haboob, which I'd never even heard of before. Kids born today are going to face 7 times more heat waves, twice as many wildfires, and 3 times as many droughts as their grandparents. And so it's no longer abstract. It is empirical, right? We've all felt it. In fact, the only good thing I can see about the climate crisis is that the guards at Buckingham Palace keep passing out from the heat, which personally I find hilarious, but I'm a weirdo. We've invented this even new type of disaster porn where on live television we can watch these things unfolding. And it's already costing your clients money, those same clients that refuse to be sustainable. We do a lot of work with the SUNY system in New York. That's the country's largest public higher education system. It's even bigger than the UC system in California. 64 campuses. They told us that they're spending $10 million a year just to adapt to climate change. Not to get ahead of it, not to advance on it, but really just to shore up their existing facilities that were not designed for this. So my mindset has changed from mitigation really into adaptation. How do we brace for impact, really? We've known about this for a long, long time. 38 years ago, Jim Hansen, chief climatologist at NASA, testified in front of Congress, telling them that global warming is real and it's happening now, and it was largely ignored. 50 years ago, then, Representative Al Gore, before he was senator, before he was vice president, held the first congressional hearings on climate change. 68 years ago, Dr. Charles David Keeling provided the first evidence that CO2 levels are rising in the atmosphere. In fact, we still call it the Keeling curve in deference to him. 114 years ago, Popular Mechanics magazine ran an article saying that all that burning of coal would eventually change the climate. And 170 years ago, Dr. Eunice Newton-Foote, an American scientist, conducted the first experiments on the warming effect of all that CO2 in the atmosphere, and she suggested that changes in the concentration would eventually impact the Earth's climate. We've known this for a long time, so we failed. And we all know the solution. The solution's been around for a long time, right? But nobody likes the solution because it inconveniences a few billionaires. But really, we just have to stop burning stuff. And nobody likes that solution. I don't know why. It seems easy enough to me. This extreme weather damage has cost us $16 million an hour, every hour, for the last 20 years. $16 million an hour every single hour. That's crazy amount of money. That's like Elon money, right? And as much as that seems like an insane amount of money, it's nothing compared to the $10 million a minute that we're spending subsidizing the fossil fuel industry, who, by the way, are already rich. And I know this is depressing. So it reminds me of a joke by one of my favorite authors, Kurt Vonnegut. And he said, we're going to go down in history as the first society that wouldn't save itself because it wasn't cost effective. And I fear he might be right. So how did we end up here? Well, let me give you some good news to cheer you up. First of all, fossil fuels are dying. They hit their peak in 2003, and they've remained pretty flat ever since. Coal is at its lowest level ever. It used to be 60% of our electricity supply, and now it's less than 15%. Building efficiency has moved in the last 20 years. It's dropped by nearly 20%. All the more impressive that in that same 20 years, we built an additional 70 billion square feet of stuff. It's just not as low as we need it to be. And carbon has been dropping. It's about cut in half from where it was 20 years ago, which is great, but we're supposed to be at more 90% at this point. U.S. States keep adopting more and more stringent energy codes, right? The darker blue states are the smart ones. The ones in the middle, I don't know what they're doing or what they're waiting for, but a rising tide raises all boats. And on the electrification front, we're trying to electrify all of our buildings now because dooming it to another generation of fossil fuel infrastructure doesn't really make sense. We're also trying to build the buildings as much as we can out of mass timber because it's really the only scalable carbon-approved or code-approved low-carbon pathway that we have, and it's really about to take off. And also, solar is booming. In my lifetime, solar has dropped 99.7%. Can you think of anything on Earth that has gone down 99.7% in price? Yeah, me either. It used to be $131 a watt, and now it's 31 cents a watt. It's officially the cheapest form of energy on the planet, which is why it's so bizarre when clients say that they can't, quote, afford solar. And this is also why 96% of all the new power capacity added has been renewables, because it just makes sense. So solar has been booming everywhere, even in the quote-unquote red states, because they also have sunshine. In fact, the purple outline states are the ones that are producing more than 10% of their electricity from solar. California just crossed a milestone last week where more than 50% was produced by solar. First time that's ever happened. Every day, 6.2 million students go to school in a solar-powered school. I love that, and it should be, of course, all of them. And everyone, all of your clients have these sustainability commitments. These are just the SBTI ones, but they all do. It's the first thing I look up when I hear that we have an RFP coming in. You got to remember, you are the good guy here. So how did we fail? We're not here to break the budget. We're not here to ruin the schedule. We are here to enhance the project. But if you talk to people, they'll tell you, oh, they hate sustainability. So I feel like we might be winning the battle, but we're certainly losing the war here. It's what we'd call a Pyrrhic victory. And this is the best example I can give you of what a Pyrrhic victory is, right? Think about all the times that you offer something to a client and those feelings of fear, guilt, and shame that come up. Like, hey, do you want to do solar? And they go, no. And you go, okay. Didn't mean to bother you, right? That's the thing with these frictions. Frictions create heat. And so you propose something to a client and suddenly you're like, suddenly everybody's Canadian. Like, oh, sorry. How's that working out for you? It's not, right? So I started thinking about, since we failed, how to reassess. And I started to realize that there's only really 14 ways that you can motivate people to do anything. The first 7 are on the left here. They're kind of negative. And the next 7, these are a little more positive. And as I started thinking about it, thinking about this break, I realized that most of our traditional sustainability arguments kind of focus on these negative sides, right? And this kind of makes sense. You're met with negativity, so you counter with more negativity. And they're effective, but only to a point. But it got me thinking, what if we focused on these more positive attributes? Duty, altruism, empathy, validation. Wouldn't this really tap into your inner strength and your superpower? And if you start to kind of map out what arguments for that could look like, you start to realize that these are some of the most cutting-edge arguments for a regenerative future. So we really started changing how we talk to the clients about sustainability, which is why I didn't stop at the first no, why I thought, let me give them a little push. And so this is what my latest book is about. I call it Frictionless, and it comes out at the end of October, and the pre-orders are going to start soon. And it really talks about how to overcome these drags and obstacles that block innovation. It is not a sustainability book. It's very much an innovation book, but I'll show you how it works. As I started listening to the clients, I realized that there were different types of excuses that I would hear. There were both false excuses, false frictions, and then true frictions. But that wasn't the whole story, because there were also these kind of known frictions and then these unknown and unexpected frictions. So that gave us kind of a matrix of 4 things of known and false, known and true, unknown and false, unknown and true. And so I decided to name these frictions. So the first type are called fake frictions. These come from habit or tradition. Then there are real frictions. These are the true obstacles and bottlenecks that we experience, and this is what we're all good at, right? The real ones. But then there were also these weird ones that just, where did that come from? And I call these imagined frictions, because these are really just kind of made up from that amygdala in the brain, and they really are just part of a perception that fits the narrative. But then there was this 4th type, and these are perhaps the most dangerous, what I called created frictions, and these are kind of the unintended consequences or byproducts of innovating. And the reason they're the most dangerous is because they could become the excuse for the client just to shut the whole thing down. So the fake frictions, those really come from having to push people outside of their comfort zone. But the real frictions come from experience and observation. Again, this is the one that you're good at. The imagined frictions, these come from a place of fear and ignorance. And the created frictions, these come from exploration. They're the most dangerous, but they're also the most ripe for innovation. So I'll give you an example. You propose to the client, hey, everybody, I got a great idea. Let's use solar. And what you hear is, well, we've never done solar before. Yeah, but we have. We do it all the time. It's not a big deal. It's cool. Just relax. And then there are the real frictions. Hey, there's only so much rooftop space. Yeah, okay, well, let's put them in the parking lot. Let's put it on campus, right? Let's look around. And again, these are the ones you guys are all good at. But then there were these weird imagined frictions. Like, why heard solar cost too much? No, you didn't, you little liar. Where'd you get that from? You've never even looked at it, right? So these are just wrong, but people say them and then people like listen. It's crazy. And then there are these created frictions. Well, now that we have solar, we're using more energy than ever before. And again, that could shut things down, or it could become an opportunity to innovate. And that's what I really like about it. Now, the fake frictions are where we end up wasting most of our energy, but the real frictions are where we should be focusing our energy. And the imagined frictions are where we waste most of our time, but the created frictions are where we should be investing our time, because those are the most ripe for innovation. And so with these 4 types of frictions, I realized that there must be a way to counter each one, and I came up with 4 ways to do that. The first one is that you have to be able to tell a story. Your story has to beat the prevailing story. Number 2, we have to increase value. Your solution can't just be the same. It has to be better than the current solution. Number 3, we have to overcome each of their objections, each of their frictions. Otherwise, they'll feel like they're not being listened to. And number 4, we really need to meet their needs. Our solution has to work. Otherwise, it's not going to really last, right? And as I looked at this, I realized not only is this a framework, but this started to tap into the empathy, the duty, the redemption, and the validation, those positive motivators that we were talking about before. And with 4 frictions and 4 ways to do it, that became a matrix, and then a minimum of 16 different ways that you can overcome these frictions. And this is what we've been doing with our clients, and this is how we've been able to achieve the greenest buildings they've ever done. You have to realize that one of the things everybody forgot about sustainability is that we are in the beauty business. I want to create places that people just look at and they start drooling over, where they just say, I want to go there. And this is why we failed. So we did it wrong. And this is kind of the problem. I know that we're not going to change everybody by drilling science into their heads, especially in America, right? And it reminds me of this quote. My friend Ari Wallach had this series on PBS called A Brief History of the Future. I encourage you to watch it. It's really great. But in the opening series, he has a line. He says, there's room for screaming and there's room for dreaming. And I just love that. Because think about the normal value proposition for sustainability. It's basically, you're a bad person. You have to take luxury away from people. You can only have the faucet on for 5 seconds. You can only take 5-minute showers. It's this kind of austerity mindset. And it doesn't really work because nobody enjoys that, really. Have you ever used a paper straw? It's a nightmare. It sticks to your lip. It falls apart. It's gross, right? And so this is why people come up to me and go, just so you know, I hate sustainability. So your clients are trying to climb Mount Sustainability. They're doing it, but they're doing it with the wrong mindset. They're doing it with this compliance-based mindset. And I can tell you they are not excited about it. And why would they be? So with my team, we have a mantra, which is that we are here to sell the brownie and not the recipe. Because who doesn't love a brownie, right? And nobody cares how much flour, sugar, or chocolate chips is inside the brownie. I mean, you do, because you're making it. But they don't. They just want the brownie. I can tell you that we are not going to create a revolution. We are not going to win if we all have to become nerds to do it, right? And this is where sustainability goes to die. I am a big fan of Asian food, right? Thai food, Chinese food, Japanese food. I eat it all the time, as my friends will attest. And which is better for you, white rice or brown rice? Yeah, I don't know either. See, that's a problem. I should know that because I'm an expert in this, right? But I don't know. And so that's where sustainability falls. Nuance equals death. I tell my team that if you're getting into the weeds, especially in the first meeting with the client, you've already lost. It's just going to become more frictions for them to do nothing. If you look at the modern environmental sustainability movement, you would think that our mission in life was to get everybody excited about life cycle assessment. But instead of trying to get everybody to speak our language, what we should have been doing is really learning to speak their language. And this is why it failed. It's what I call death by Excel. And sustainability is full of this boring stuff. And as a result, we just forget how nature works. And so we are relegated to this game of substitution, where meat is bad, so here's plant-based meat, but that's not meat. And leather's bad, so here's vegan leather, but that's not really leather. And concrete's bad, so here's something else, but that ain't concrete. And that's fine, but it's only going to get you so far. If you're in a car and you're headed 80 miles an hour and you're going off of a cliff, slowing down to 40 isn't going to help, right? And if you do it in a Prius, it's not going to help either. I mean, you'll look good doing it, but still, it's not going to change the outcome. You're still going to go over. What we need to do is we need to turn the wheel. We need to go in a different direction. So that's what we've been trying to do with Canon Design. We've been really forging this new direction with our clients, and it's really coming from this kind of mindset of humility and that we failed, and we need to take a much more empathetic approach to it. Our company's organized around these 6 global ambitions. My team and I are in charge of this one called Planet 2100. How do we build remarkable regenerative design through the next century? And our goal is very simple. It's 5 zeros: 0 energy, 0 carbon, 0 harm, 0 water, 0 waste on every project. Easy to say, not so easy to do. And then we report on our progress on our annual sustainability report, which you could download here. And it's working, right? We're building the greenest buildings we've ever done. Fortune called us one of the 50 Change the World companies. We were the only design firm in the list this past year. Metropolis named us our Planet Positive Firm of the Year in 2024. Time Magazine wrote about us and how we're doing this with our clients. Fast Company just recently named us again, for the 3rd year in a row, one of the most innovative firms in North America. It turns out the world sucks, right? It needs redesigning. And so we need to fix 3 things very quickly. We need to fix our transportation system, our food system, and our buildings. And although I like food and like to drive, I'm not an expert in those things. So I focus on the building part. And I know that if we can imagine better worlds, that we can build them. So very, very quickly, I'm going to show you a little bit of how we're doing this. We have an initiative that we call Health for All, and it really looks at really down to the micro scale of how we do this. It turns out that by living near a golf course, you can double your risk of Parkinson's disease because of all the pesticides they use. In Santa Monica, they found that children's asthma rates were going down, and they couldn't figure out why, and it was because of all the early adopters of first hybrids and then electric vehicles. Last year, they closed a coal-fired power plant in Pittsburgh, and children's asthma rates improved, which makes sense, right? So that means where we put our buildings and the systems we put in our buildings have a profound effect on them. The climate crisis is a health crisis. It's what Time Magazine called the hidden health costs of climate change. And it costs us a lot of money, about $800 billion a year, just here in the US. So it's really up to us to fix that. That means that we could decarbonize the entire system for free just based on the health benefits alone. Forget the carbon story. In addition, things are not equal around the country. Where you live determines how long you live. Your zip code is your largest determinant of health. More so than genetics, more so than lifestyle, zip code is the biggest social determinant. And it's not just life expectancy. There are a number of these kind of metrics. So we built this tool, and along the top there, those are social determinants. Along the bottom there, those are environmental factors. In the middle, these are symptoms. And the idea is that you put in an address, and it tells you which ones are poor. And then more importantly, in the center there, it tells you how the building could respond to this. So if you know that walkability, air quality, and noise pollution are an issue for this zip code, suddenly now a green roof isn't a nice thing to have. A green roof is directly addressing those disparities. And because it's just all AI enabled, we just change the address and we get a different output. So I do this now before every meeting with clients, just to have a different conversation. That's what it means to really focus on selling the brownie and not the recipe. So across the board, whether it's facilities, waste operations, there are opportunities to be had, brownies to be had if you look for them. And so I'm really not selling them on sustainability. I'm selling them on the outcomes and benefits that sustainability provides. Very, very different way of working. I also want to show you this. I'm jumping around a little. But we started playing with sensors, because now they're so cheap that we can kind of put them everywhere, and we can measure down to the part per billion, which is cool. So we felt that we had this covered, right? On the one hand, we were speccing healthier materials. On the other hand, we were putting in these IAQ sensors into our projects, but something still turned out to be missing. And the missing part was that the clients were ignoring the data. So then we realized we also had to design how the facility responds to that. So this is a crosswalk that we did. These are the maximum acceptable levels from LEED, WELL, Living Building Challenge, Fitwell, and Reset. And I just picked the lowest levels across the board, because they don't agree, by the way. So this then became our design standard of what we should be designing to. So if the building starts to build up CO2 in the afternoons and it gets above 900 parts per million, we flood that building with fresh air, and then everybody perks up like daisies in the sun because now their brain is getting oxygen again. So suddenly now we can start to really design to a level of performance that we never thought possible. And really, by understanding what these sensors can do, you can see the reasons why we're doing it. And by the way, these are just off-the-shelf sensors. We're now, the next level is we want to get into custom sensors to do even deeper stuff. We also started mapping out the kind of most common sources of indoor air pollution, what we called our dirty dozen. These were the 12 most common ones. And so then we found healthier manufacturers and then healthier products for all of them. And then, of course, double-checked and sourced them for EPDs and so forth. And then updated our specs for all of that, which is also pretty cool. And then I want to show you this. The other bit of our mindset that's changed is moving away from a traditional sustainability mindset and into what I call a regenerative mindset. We're really designing not just each building one at a time, but in a much more holistic way for the entire site. What I've been telling the clients is that we're moving from aspiration into perspiration. In other words, we're moving away from kind of targets and goals and really into how can the building perform real work? How can it achieve specific outcomes? That's the idea. And what's great is it really upends that paradigm from the old cut, slash, and burn mindset of the last 200 years into this much more regenerative one of grow, regenerate, and breathe. So the last thing I want to leave you with is this. We're working on a regenerative campus now for a biotech company, and the mantra there is regenerative, nature-positive campus where all users can thrive, which sounds very nice, of course, but we started creating metrics of what we would measure for this campus, and the client, we were having lunch, and she said, just so you know, when you leave, we're not going to measure any of this crap. I said, what do you mean? She said, well, it's too fussy and it's too complex, and my team's not going to, I mean, it's fine for now, but my team's not going to measure it. And I said, well, let's create something that it will measure. And she said, well, you need something that an 8-year-old can understand. So those became our metrics, something an 8-year-old can understand. And so the first one that we came up with was simply number of butterflies. And there are only 3 options: none, some, and lots. Because if you see lots of butterflies, that means a lot of really complex things are working. The hydrological systems are working, the pollinator pathways are working, right? A lot of complex things are working, and the result is butterflies. And so this became kind of our metrics of success, these resultant illustrative indicators, I call them. Another one is number of outdoor meetings. Are you having none, some, or lots? And if you have lots, that means that the furniture we picked is adequate and comfortable. You feel acoustically private but not too cut off. You feel thermally protected. There's no glare on your screen, right? A lot of complex things are working, and the result is you have a lot of outdoor meetings. And then my favorite one was the decibel level of laughter coming from the playground. Is it none, some, or lots? And if you hear lots of laughter from the playground, that means that you did something correct. And as I was telling the story to one of our other clients, a children's hospital, they said, we want to make that our metric. The decibel level of laughter in the hallways. Is it none, some, or lots? Because everybody coming to the children's hospital is terrified. And if they hear laughter as they walk in, that will lower their cortisol levels. And so we now have dozens of these illustrative indicators that we use, and we workshop them with the clients. We even have them for sustainability. So instead of like targeting scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions, which again, I know you care about, but your clients don't, instead we target how much children's asthma can we reduce in the neighborhood. And so it's just a very different way of looking at these systems in a very holistic way, and really moving us from an engineering mindset into a much more biological mindset. And how do we eventually just grow and build the way nature does? That's the paradigm shift we need. And frankly, I think that we really only fail from a lack of imagination. So with that, that's my time. Thank you all so much. Hope to see you all in person soon. I encourage you all to be very, very curious. By the way, if you want a copy of these slides, you can text the word green to that phone number. That is not my number, by the way. That's an automated system. But if you text the word green, it'll give you instructions to download the slides, and then I'll send them to you. You can also just email me too, of course, if that was easier. But otherwise, thank you for listening. Hope you enjoyed the conference, and I hope to see you all in person soon.